This project has been a long time coming. It's been a response to the moving of this kind of quite unique development of moving a river, a major tropical river, 5.5 kilometres, and the impact that has had on the land, environmentally, culturally, economically, and also, potentially in the future as well in terms of unforeseen catastrophes. So it's involved a lot of people, and if I can briefly just thank the amazing efforts of Borroloola, which is a little art centre with an enormous heart that's moved heaven and earth to pull this project together without any funding. It is a two-part project, so we'll have a second part which will open in a month's time, and we'll have Nancy McDinney and Stewart Hoosan coming down as well. So, and they'll be dealing more with the post-colonial story, the backstory to these works. Jacky-Green's works uniquely focus on the impact of the mine, and it's something that contemporary artists in Australia and around the world are more and more grappling with, is how do we tell these stories, that are, and it's a work that's absolutely critical in terms of the impact, not just of mining and responsible mining that we all want to see, but of course of climate change and the global impacts that these things happen. So both from the sort of within the art world and more broadly, Jacky's works have an enormous impact. Jacky has worked very closely with Seán Kerins from ANU and the unique Department of Economic Development there. So it's really been the two of them and their collaboration that's focused the images and the text. So, and the texts are quite unusually, again, for an art exhibition, very much part of the work and part of getting the story out and the voices out. So, thank you, and it's a great honour to have you both here. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Well, first of all, I'd like to, as a New Zealander, acknowledge the traditional owners of Sydney. So, mihi mai karanga mai. Mihi mai ki ngā tangata whenua o wahine o Hirini. Mihi mai i ngā hunga mate. Mihi mai hunga ora. Nore rā tēnā koutou kātua. So I just acknowledge the people of this land, of this beautiful harbour. I acknowledge their dead that have gone before us and done great feats, and I acknowledge their living that are still in this world today and do great feats. And I welcome you all here. Look, it's a great pleasure to be able to introduce Jack. I've worked with Jack for the last over a decade now on doing land management in the Northern Territory when I was first at the Northern Land Council. And when I first met Jack, I got a phone call from when I started a new job running the Caring for Country unit, and it was Jackie Green. And he was telling me to get out of the office and get down to Borroloola because there were some big issues. So it's a 1,000-kilometre drive down to Borroloola. And so off I headed, and then I met Jack, and then he worked a spell on me, and I've been there for the last 10 years. And just a bit about the Southwest Gulf of Carpentaria, and I'd say to come to the exhibition that will follow this, because it's an incredible story of sort of conquest and resistance of when Europeans came in and they brought their cattle through the country. It was the wave into bringing cattle from Queensland into the Northern Territory and then into the Kimberley. And when they bought the cattle, they bought their guns, and they shot anybody who resisted. So it was a fight for water holes. The cattle needed the water, but as you'll see in some of these paintings, Jack's got water places, and the water places are the sacred sites where the ancestral beings rest. And these places were being felled by cattle, and therefore Garawa, Wangi, Yanyu and Mara people, to protect their cattle, were spearing them. And for that, men, women and children and babies were shot, hundreds of them. So it's a great story of resistance, but what we see now is the story happening again. And it's not for cattle, it's miners that are coming into the country. And we see what's happening at the moment is there's the northern development of Australia. The Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, has a vision for what Australia should look like, and he's wanting to turn it into something big. And this has been a vision that's happened many times before in the past and always failed. And what's forgotten about are the people who own that land, the Aboriginal people of Northern Australia, who make up about 30% of Northern Australia's population, and through land rights and native title legislation have managed to get back 30% of the land. And this is their property, and yet are being overruled. There's over 200 submissions that have come into the Northern Development Task Force, and when you look at it, very few are Aboriginal voices. People don't have the ability to be able to articulate their views in pen and paper in the way white people demand. So what we've got to make sure is that their voices aren't missed. And what's coming out of this is that people, as you see with Jack, want to talk about not the landscape that you or I might recognise of this amazing tropical savanna of the biodiversity and such diverse places, river systems that are uninterrupted from their headwaters to their mouths. There's nothing like that in South Australia and southern states since Europeans have come and started smashing the country. And so it's the north that's being opened up for development and for money. So there's these other values that Jack and his compatriots talk about, and it's protecting the sentient landscape. And that's something that's sort of a life project of Aboriginal people in the north. And I think one thing to remember is it's very difficult in these large electoral seats in the north where one person has so many, such a wide area to represent, and they're not really taken into account in the political process. There's few Aboriginal people in the Australian Parliament, and someone who comes from New Zealand just finds that so amazing, since New Zealand has had Māori people in Parliament since the 1860s participating in the democracy. So we do look for things to start to change. But keeping that in mind, it's people in the cities that can keep pressure on the politicians and hold them to account about what's happening in the north. Where are the Aboriginal voices? And one thing that's being targeted is the way Aboriginal people own land. Aboriginal people own land as common property, and that means that there's many people who hold title to that land, but it's demonised as communal property, and it's sort of conflated with the Soviet Union and the failed Eastern Bloc as though it's a problem and that it's a barrier to development. So the way that development has to occur is that common property of Aboriginal people have to be smashed. But we have to keep in mind it's property. And it's private property held by not a group but by an individual. And so why is Aboriginal property devalued when our property down here is not devalued? And you'll see this in some of Jack's stories. So we start to see this double standard sort of appearing. And just to conclude before I hand over to Jack, is that people have asked about the paintings when they come into Borroloola, about where are the paintings from the Dreamtime, the things that we see in other places that we like. Well, the historian Patrick Wolfe wrote just recently about the temerity of Aboriginal artists who refuse to paint dreaming stories, but they paint about the stories of dispossession. And this is something that people in the Gulf do. When Borroloola Art Centre opened in the early 1980s, the senior people there made a decision that they would not paint the stories of dreaming. What they would paint was the stories of history and the stories of dispossession. Not so much to portray themselves as people who were conquered, but to use their art as a weapon, to fight back and to wound settler society, to make them think about what's happening in the north. And somebody who I think is such an expert at using art as his shovel-nosed spear and bringing it down to Sydney is Mr. Jacky-Green, a Gulliver man. And I'd like to hand over to Jackie.
First of all, I want to thank the British Government for allowing me coming to their country, and thank you all for listening to my side of the story. Painting what I've been doing, it sort of meant a lot to my four clan group, Māori and Gulliver. They're all sort of from the country, and you can see what damage happening in our country with mines, with government companies, also with policy and guidelines. And we feel really no good because we get pushed in the one town and yarded up like cattle, and we feel really no good because the land is given back. We have to fight to the court for them to get given back to Aboriginal people, and the government sort of dragging us back into the town area. And what my painting is, because I can't read or write, and I'm wanting to get my voice across to say to the government and the mining company please pull up, you're entering in our land. We have cultures, part of these land all tied up with cultures and dreaming tracks and all that sort of things. I can run through some most of these paintings, but they're all tied up with certain area around MacArthur, Red Bank Mines, that's in MacArthur, and Muirland Mine, there's a little big one, and one in Queensland called Century Mine. The Aboriginal people ties on both sides to our culture. In Queensland, there's no boundary there for Aboriginal people, there's only boundary. The government put it across there and stop us that way, but we still go across because our culture ties through those areas. And what I'm saying here, it would be good if government can sort of start talking to all the groups that's in that area, not to the country. What they're doing, they're coming in and aiming picking one person to go through, to get his money freed up, or government comes in and they pick one Aboriginal person. Aboriginal person, whether it doesn't understand the politics of the side of the story, or you reckon that's the best way to get to other Aboriginal people. It's just like a white ants that if the roots of the tree and one roots die, they comes in there. We feel no good because as it comes in and eat one, it'll eat a lot, and then all of a sudden the trunk of the tree will die down. So that's what I want to say because if you look at some of these paintings here, the 4 Clan group will come to our ceremony. This one here is Windmill Lines. There's 2 sites. This one here is on MacArthur River with Borroloola, and we always have our dance group there. We call Song of the Good One. But now they've got tourists coming. They've got a station there. That's on MacArthur River Station itself. Then there you have Red Bank Mines, so they will near Robinson. There's they're trying to stop people from coming in, don't come and go. There's parts of us coming in, the Roses, settlers, and there's the mining company coming in, and we're trying to stop them, and there's no way we can stop them because someone comes in. If you have a look around the back there, there's another painting over there. It's the same thing. Everywhere you see there's the drill rigs, so it's drilling everywhere. Gas, all types of gas happening in Borroloola, also carbon area, and it's spread very wide. Other painting there that tells you how we think the government should and the mining company should try and deal with us a bit more. And the one in the back there that tells you about MacArthur Mines, it's sort of getting bigger and bigger. It's about Red Bank Mine. They dug it up and all this white stuff comes out of the ground and it's killing all the water. If you have a look at the river, it's sort of, there's a creek on that, you've got all this white stuff on the side of the bank, and it's really bad, and they promised us that we was going to work together as a team to fix it up. But then, afterwards, they never come back and talk about it. They screamed to the mining company to go ahead and start looking for another house. That's the same thing idea that we have mining thing as well, so ends in our country too. This one here is after airplane, there's one company that's on an army that flew across from Queensland to back into the Northern Territory, that crashed on the road. Some people survived and then they're walking out and the person died. This one survived. He had been best family before struck by. He came in there and then so they brought him back and there was no clean shelter. They built up station with him and they looked after him there and tried to teach him. Making him strong so he can take him back to the station and send him back where he was coming from. Then after that, because then they started with dance, they made a dance out of it. So you can see all those little tags. That airplane crashed and made a big thing and got a dance out of it because they couldn't know the right story in so they made this dance up. These are the trucks, the police come in, they sort of look at everything people on the long grass and say, hey, get out of here. Or go somewhere, there's no other people can go these days. They're all hiding in the scrub somewhere under the tree. that's all. That one there in the back of you, that's Matata with the mines again. And then it's right in there. It's a lot worse than now, because if you drive past it with a Māori car, I drove a couple of times, and you can see that where the black waste thing, it's sort of smoking, starting to burn, and it's smoking, and if you drive along with the window lines down, you can smell that really terrible smell coming across to you. And the one over there, that's the last one, it's about the mining company, the government, or any government that comes in and talk to us. They come in with their, flying with their plane and that, and talk to us, and then they fly out. Whereas Aboriginal people down the bottom, we're still scratching our heads. So what he really said, you know, we don't really get our mind around it, and they expect us to agree to something straight away. So that's what I wanted to talk about. If the company and the mining companies, they still want to work with Aboriginal people, we have no problem with the mines, but they need to talk to Aboriginal people, not just comes in and think that it's right, you know, and pick one person, and we feel really no good, so we need to work together as a team. We can make sure there's nothing damaged too much on the country, because we have tourists coming in, and you know, those sort of things. We want to be able to keep our country clean together as one, and that's why I say really all the time, to them all this painting to try and get my voice out so they can understand. That's all I say. Thank you.